Afternoon, boys and girls, moms and dads. I'm glad you could join me today. Since we can't be together for Easter, I thought I would like to read you a story from one of my favorite childhood memories, child craft books, folk and fairy tales. And this story is The Tale of Peter Rabbit by Beatrix Potter. Let's begin. Once upon a time, there were 4 little rabbits, and their names were Flopsy, Mopsy, Cottontail, and Peter. They lived with their mother in a sandbank beneath the root of a very big fir tree. "Now, my dears," said old Mrs. Rabbit one morning, "you may go into the fields or down the lane, but you don't go into Mr. McGregor's garden. Your father had an accident there. He was put in a pie by Mrs. McGregor. Now run along and don't get into any mischief. I am going out." Then old Mrs. Rabbit took a basket and her umbrella and went through the wood to the baker's. She bought a loaf of brown bread and 5 currant buns. Flopsy, Mopsy, and Cottontail, who were good little bunnies, went down the lane to gather blackberries. But Peter, who was very naughty, ran straight to Mr. McGregor's garden and squeezed under the gate. There's a mama, and I think that's Peter. Yes. Okay, turn the page. Look what's happening here. Let's read on. First he ate some lettuce, and then he ate French green beans, and then he ate some radishes, and then he ate some, and all of a sudden he was feeling rather sick. Let me turn this way so you can see too. But round the end of the cucumber frame, whom should he meet but Mr. McGregor? He went to go look for some parsley for his sick tummy. Mr. McGregor was on his hands and knees planting young cabbages, but he jumped up and ran after Peter, waving a rake and calling after Peter, "Stop, thief, stop!" Peter was mostly dreadfully frightened. He rushed all over the garden and had forgotten the way back to the gate. He lost one of his shoes among the cabbages and the other among the potatoes. After losing them, he ran on all 4 legs and went faster, so that I think he might have gotten away altogether, but unfortunately he ran into a gooseberry net, and he was caught by the large button on his jacket, and it was his blue jacket with the brass buttons, quite new. Peter gave himself up for lost and shed big tears. But his sobs were overheard by some friendly sparrows, who flew to him in great excitement and implored him to exert himself. Mr. McGregor came up with a sieve, and he intended to pop on top of Peter, but Peter wriggled out just in time, leaving his jacket behind him, and he rushed to the tool shed and he jumped into a can. It would have been a beautiful thing to hide in if it didn't have so much water in it. Mr. McGregor was quite sure that Peter was somewhere in the tool shed, perhaps hidden under the flower pot. He began to turn them over carefully, looking under each. Presently, Peter squeezed. Let's turn the page. Peter squeezed. Kerchoo! Mr. McGregor was after him in no time. He put his foot upon Peter, who jumped out of the window, upsetting 3 plants. The window was too small for Mr. McGregor, and he was tired of running after Peter. He went back to his work. Peter sat down to rest. He was all out of breath and trembling with fright, and he had not the least idea of which way to go. Also, he was very damp and sitting in that can. And after time, he began to wander about, going lippity, lippity, and not very fast, and looking all around. He found a door in a wall, but it was locked, and there was no room for a fat little rabbit to squeeze underneath. An old mouse was running in and out over the stone doorstep, carrying peas and beans to her family in the wood. Peter asked her, "What's the way out of the gate?" But she had such a large pea in her mouth that she could not answer. She only shook her head at him. Peter began to cry. And then he tried to find his way straight across the garden, but he became more and more puzzled. Presently he came to a pond where Mr. McGregor filled his water cans. A white cat was staring at some goldfish. She sat very, very still, but now and then her tail twitched as if it were alive. Peter thought it best to go away without speaking to her. He had heard about cats from his cousin, little Benjamin Bunny. He went back toward the tool shed, but suddenly, whoosh! Scratch, 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 scratch. Peter scuttered underneath the bushes, but presently nothing happened. He came out and he climbed upon a wheelbarrow and peeped over. And the first thing he saw was Mr. McGregor hoeing onions. His back was turned toward Peter, and beyond him was the gate. Peter got down very quietly off the wheelbarrow and started running as fast as he could. And along the walk behind some blackcurrant bushes, Mr. McGregor caught sight of him from the corner of his eye. But Peter did not care. He slipped underneath the gate. And he was out, under the wood, outside the garden. Mr. McGregor hung up the little jacket and the shoes. Look, he got out. He got out. Mr. McGregor hung up the little jacket and the shoes. Turn the page. And made a scarecrow. Look at that. And made a scarecrow to frighten the blackbirds. Peter never stopped running or looking behind him until he got home to the big fir tree. He was so tired that he flopped down upon his nice, soft sand floor of the rabbit hole and shut his eyes. His mother was busy cooking. She wondered what had he done with his clothes. It was the second little jacket and little pair of shoes that Peter had lost in a fortnight. I am sorry to say, Peter was not very well during the evening. His mother put him to bed and made some chamomile tea, and she gave a dose of it to him. 1 tablespoon to be taken at bedtime. But Flopsy, Mopsy, and Cottontail had bread and milk and blackberries for supper. The end. Well, I hope you enjoyed the story of Peter Rabbit. And I hope you have a wonderful Easter. I love you. Until we meet again.